Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a beginner guide video. Now it's been a while since I posted one of these, but I did meet up with a customer last night and there was a lot of questions and a lot of things that we talked about. And I figured it'd be a good idea to go ahead and transition some of that over to a video and share it with you guys. So I have about 10 or 11, maybe 15, I don't know. We'll see how many things I have coming to mind as I create this video on the fly. But I want to talk about how you can add corals to your reef tank, the things you should be doing, looking out for, and tips for success. So with all of that said, let's go and get started. Okay guys, number one, and by the way, these are in no particular order. They're just kind of how they came to mind. You want to source your coral from a reputable source slash, company. Now, for me personally, I have learned this lesson the hard way. Way back when I first started, way back like 6 years ago, I used to get coral from everybody and any company that would have it that was a decent price, right? Well, unfortunately, that didn't always work out for me. I would get stuff in and I wasn't really big on quarantining back then, and we'll talk about that later in the video. And I lost a lot of coral and a lot of money in the process. So your best bet is to find somebody local that you trust, that you can see their system in person, you can learn about how they take care of the corals, and then, get it from them. You probably get a better price overall. But if you don't have that as an option, you can always go to FishOfHex.com, a little plug there, and you can buy my coral, right? Or you can even go further and, source out other companies like WWC, Worldwide Corals, or Jason Fox. I'm sure there's many more out there. Those are just the companies that I purchased from in the past. So you can go ahead and source out to companies that have good reviews and have been in the business for a while, and you can trust them. So that's what I recommend, because again, you're going to save yourself a ton of money in the long run and a lot of headaches that we'll talk about in a little bit here. Okay, my second tip is to find out what the par or light intensity in which the coral came out of. Now, this is really important if you're purchasing SPS and acroporas and stuff like that. The reason why you want to know this number is you want to try to match up the old tank to the new tank lighting wise, and we'll talk about other water parameters here in a second, but trying to get the pars close to what they came out of will help reduce the stress and any chance of them either turning really dark because they were in a low par environment when you put them in your tank, or vice versa, they bleach out because you put them at 800 par when they came out of 250, something like that. I mean, that's a little bit of an extreme, but you guys get the point, right? So try to get that information ahead of time. I know on my website and other websites that I talked about previously in the video, they do put that information in the description. I know in my setup, it's a little bit different because I have two phases. I have the main display in which I grow a lot of the colonies, and my two low boys in which I grow out colonies on disc. Now that par is a little bit higher because I do try to grow coral as quickly as possible. Now when I cut those frags, they come over to the tub, which has a lower par. And the reason why I do that is because I want those corals to heal and adjust to the lower par, which is more closer to most of you guys here, which then increases the chances of that coral surviving when it makes it to your system, right? So do your best to try to get that information ahead of time. And when adding the coral, if you have to put it on a frag rack or just have it sitting on your rock structure as close to that par as it originally came out of, then do that until it's happy, and then you can glue it down. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so my third tip is make sure you're floating bags or cups to get temperature before adding them to your quarantine tank or your main display. Now, the reason why I say do that is because depending on if you had them shipped overnight, depending on the time of year, the temperature, there's so many different variables. You might get a coral that came in at 50 degrees because the heat pack died. I mean, that happens, right? And your tank's at 79 degrees. Now, you definitely don't want to take that coral from 50 degrees and plop it directly into 79. It's probably not going to be very happy, regardless of the type. Even if it is a soft coral or a LPS, they're probably still not going to like that drastic fluctuation in temperature. So go ahead and set the bags and the cups in the water, let them float until the temperature is the same. Now, a little extra to this, I would always say that if you're purchasing a good amount of frags, go ahead and also test the alkalinity. Now, this is definitely going to be important if you're purchasing Acropora and SPS, because depending on the system, which again, most people will tell you what they have in the description. I know that I do, what alkalinity range they're at, but it's best to test and kind of see where you're at. You might get a coral that came out of a tank that has 10 DKH and you're running 7.5. You definitely don't want to be just dropping an Acropora from 10 to 7.5 and hoping for the best. What I would do at that point is put all those corals in a container and then drip acclimate or put cups of water over the next hour or two and slowly adjust them to that DKH. Now, of course, that's not as perfect as it should be. Ideally, we want our tanks to match up and everything to be perfect with light and alkalinity, but that's not always a possibility. So instead of just doing these drastic things, plopping and dropping and all that kind of stuff, you can drip acclimate and also temperature acclimate by floating. It's a very good idea, and it is worth the extra time, especially if you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Why not take the extra couple hours or few hours and better your chances of success, right? Okay, number 4, make sure you're dipping all of your corals regardless of where you get them from. Now, me personally, no matter if it's my best friend or, Jason Fox, even though his stuff is really clean, I still dip my corals because it's kind of just a habit at this point. It's not, even if I know that the coral's clean, I still do it because it makes me feel better. It just does, right? Now, if you're getting them from a place that you've never ordered from before, or you don't know this tank very well, then yes, definitely want to be dipping all of your corals. Now, me personally, I actually send 5 milliliters of coral dip with every one of my orders just as a, hey, thank you. Just in case you don't have it, here you go. Now, I don't have any major pests or anything worth dipping for, but it is, again, a good habit to get into and something that you should be doing, again, regardless of where you get your coral from. Okay, number 5. Now, this is along the lines of the previous one. Make sure you're quarantining all of your corals. Now, I've talked about this 100 times. This is probably the 150th time, I swear. But it's so important. It really is, and that's why I keep talking about it. I have, in the description of all my products or coral-wise, I have a video showing you how to set up a coral quarantine tank. Go watch the damn video. It's brutally important. I don't know if that's the word I should be using, but it's that important. You have to be quarantining your corals. I know a lot of you guys who purchase from me say you don't. That's on you. But listen, if you're going to the local fish store and you're buying coral, you need to quarantine that stuff. There are some pests that, in particular, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but an acropora eating flatworm is the worst pest in the history of acropora pests. It is the worst. And guess what? Most of the time you don't see the eggs, you don't see it until it's too late, and then your entire reef tank is getting bent over by an acropora eating flatworm. It is not good. It's devastating, and people have just lost thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars by these little jokers. So it's important. You need to quarantine your coral, and I know I just keep harping on it, but just do it. Just do it. Just shut up and just make the damn quarantine tank and quarantine your corals. That's all. Okay, number 6, I believe that's where we're at right now. Make sure you're cutting the plug off your corals. Now, when I get acropora in, it usually is encrusted on a nice frag plug, and man, it sucks to do this, but I always cut the frag off and re-glue it on a new plug and throw that base in the garbage. The main reason for that is, like I said, acropora eating flatworms. The eggs are going to be at the base and also underneath on the frag plug. And you can just eliminate that whole issue by simply cutting it off and getting rid of it. And that goes for other pests as well. Now, of course, you still got to quarantine it and monitor it and make sure, there isn't anything growing over a period of time. And now in my coral video, my coral quarantine tank video, I talk about how long you should be doing it, but I usually keep acropora for 60 days minimum in a quarantine tank. That gives plenty of time for those little jokers to hatch if there's any eggs or to see any pests of anything, flatworms, red bugs, anything that might be an issue. I'll be able to catch it in that 60 days and take care of it. Now, one quick note to that, if you find a pest and you eradicate a pest, your quarantine tank, just like when it comes to quarantining for ick for fish, it starts over from day 1. So you might be, 59 days in and then you see a red bug. Well, when you kill off those red bugs with whatever method you decide to use, your quarantine period starts over and happy 60 days again, right? So yeah, cut the plugs off, remove pests real quick, re-glue them on new frag plugs and quarantine. Okay, number 7, don't be moving corals around and give them plenty of time to adjust. Now, one of the questions I get quite often is, hey man, my coral's not happy here. I just moved it over here. How long should I wait until I move it again to see if it's happy? Well, what I like to do is try to match up the par like I mentioned previously. Don't blast the coral with too much flow. Put it where I think I want it to be and then give it a couple weeks. Don't touch it. Don't make any other changes to the tank. Just leave it alone and see how it adjusts. If the polyps are out, it seems happy, it's feeding, and it starts to encrust, at that point you can go ahead and cut it and glue it into your rock structure, or depending on what you've done so far, maybe you just want to put the frag plug in there, go ahead and glue it in place. Number 8, this is really important for those of you who are just starting out with SPS frags. Don't blast new corals with high flow. Everybody talks about having a shit ton of flow in an SPS reef tank. I mean, the more flow, the better, right? Well, it's cool when you have colonies that are established and they're actually encrusted and you don't have to worry about them getting blasted around the tank and destroyed. I've lost a ton of money just putting corals in places where there's really high flow or adjusting power heads because I think they need more flow for whatever reason. And then that frag gets dislodged and then sent around the tank, and then it ends up underneath the rock structure where it dies. So your best bet is to not blast new corals, give them plenty of time to encrust, and you know, you'll get better growth and better looking colonies if you're not just slamming them with flow dead on. One thing I talked about last night is I like to bounce flow, and I did this during the live stream as well, is I like to bounce flow off the front and side panels and the bottom of the tank, because that way the flow isn't directly hitting colonies. It is kind of swirling around the tank and adding that variance though. So don't blast new corals and you'll be good to go. Okay, number 9. When it comes to super gluing your corals in your reef tank, make sure that you add the glue while the coral is out of the tank. I know that's kind of a given, but when you put the coral into the tank, make sure the glue is the last thing that goes underneath the water. Now, the reason why I say this is if you just put glue on the end of an SPS stick and then you just go glue first, there's a good chance that glue will spread up over the frag onto your fingers and become a big mess. So always do coral first, glue last, and then turn it around and put it where you need it to be. Hold it in place for a minute or so until it kind of hardens, and then you'll be good to go. So lost a lot of SPS doing it that way. Like, oh, I'm just going to dip this in, glue first, and then it just smears all the way up the frag. So coral first, and you'll be good to go. Okay, number 10, don't make any major changes to your reef tank after adding the corals. Now, one thing that I talked about last night was this guy was dealing with dino, so he was having nutrient issues, and then the dino went away, and now he's kind of getting his nutrients where they should be. And then he was also using 2 different methods to add alkalinity and calcium to his reef tank. Now, we talked about making changes slowly after adding the coral that I just gave him. Now, the goal is to keep the tank as stable as possible. So if you have 2 different methods or 3 different methods of adding alkalinity or whatever you have going on, keep it the same until the corals are good. If you are going to take something offline, like for example, we were taking calc offline and just primarily going to 2-part, slowly bring the calc offline as you adjust the levels for the 2-part. That way there isn't any major fluctuations in your alkalinity. And this goes for nutrients as well. If you have low nutrients, don't just start dumping in a bunch of NO3 and PO4 that you can get from my website. I'm always plugging it, man. I got to do it. It's business, right? But don't be making any major changes to your system. Don't be adding lights. Don't be changing out lighting. Don't be doing anything until those corals are established, they're happy, and then make your adjustments. Because what if they die off, right? You make a change and you do multiple changes, right? What if they start dying off? You can't figure out what's going on. That's why in the reef tank, you always make one change, see how it impacts the system, and then make another adjustment based on that. So yeah, let's go and move on to a bonus one. Okay, so this is a bonus tip for those of you who buy a lot of coral at one time. I know that there are some of you out there, believe it or not, some of you have bought 3 of my 20 packs at the same time. I ain't mad at you. Trust me, I ain't mad. I really appreciate the support. But some of you guys are buying a ton of coral at one time and you're stuffing it into a tank, again, at the same time. What you need to do if you're adding, depending on the size of your tank, I mean, if you have a 500-gallon tank, what's 50 frags going to do? Probably nothing, right? But if you have a 50-gallon tank and you put the same 50 frags in there, you need to monitor your alkalinity very closely over the next couple weeks. Now, I imagine over the first few days, you're not really going to see anything because the corals are still adjusting. But once they start growing, you're going, depending on how big the system is and how many frags you've added, you might start getting dips in alkalinity. So it's always important that for the first few weeks of after adding new corals, specifically SPS, you need to monitor your alkalinity a little bit more frequently. Now, if you haven't tried it, you know, if you're a baller status, I guess, then you can go ahead. I'm just playing, but it's cool, but it ain't that cool. You can go ahead and just keep an eye on your alkalinity and make any adjustments to your whatever method you're using as needed as those corals start to grow. But if you're just Joe Schmo with a Hannah checker, like most of us, then make sure you're testing a little bit more frequently. And again, keep an eye on those adjustments. Now, whatever you do, don't anticipate any kind of growth and then dosing ahead of time. Ixnay on doing that, okay? So don't be like, well, my corals, I just added 50 corals or whatever, and I think I'm going to need this much alkalinity because they're going to start growing any day now and I don't want to have any issues. So I might as well just dose 500 milliliters of 2-part. Yeah, don't do that. I know that's a little bit extreme when it comes numbers wise, but you guys get the point. Don't be anticipating growth, just monitor the fluctuations and make those small adjustments as needed. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. If you like them or if you have any more ideas for videos like this, feel free to put that stuff in the comment section. If you're still here, head over to FishOfHex.com. Use the promo code I love YouTube, because we're all in the business of getting on the algorithm here, for 15% off your order. And again, I think that 20 pack is still up there. I'm pretty sure it is. But anyway, I appreciate the support. Use the promo code. And the only reason why I'm saying it, because if you made it this far, you deserve a promo code, right? So anyways, guys, I love you. I will see you Thursday for the live stream, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to comment, like, share the video. I don't care what you say. Just say something to me. Like, what's up? All right. I'll see you guys later. Peace.